Everyone, welcome everyone. Just wait for a few more people coming out of the waiting room to log on and we'll get started. Okay. So good afternoon. My name is Keshia Pollack Porter, and I'm the chair of the Department of Health Policy and Management at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's session. I'm thrilled to be here and to have the honor of opening up the session that's sponsored by the department's IDARE committee, or the Inclusion, Diversity, Anti-Racism, and Equity Committee. And I want to acknowledge all of the committee members, especially the co-chairs who are with us today, Michelle Spencer and Edith Jones. Thank you for helping to organize this. We're here today to talk about the importance of civic engagement for health equity. We recognize the political polarization of the last few years and its impact on health, healthcare, and equity. And this polarization includes distrust of the medical and healthcare systems, distrust of science, misinformation, and a growing divisive nature of our politics. And all of this threatens our collective agendas of advancing equity. Today, we're going to have what I believe is going to be an exciting conversation, and we're joined by Marc Morial, President and CEO of the National Urban League, the nation's largest historic civil rights and urban advocacy organization. He's the former mayor of New Orleans, Louisiana, former president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and former Louisiana state senator. Mayor Morial is a political and civic leader who is often on the national cable news circuits, providing insights on current social and political events. He's a champion of justice and a friend of our department. Joining Mayor Morial in conversation is Dr. Darrell Gaskin, who's director of the Hopkins Center for Health Disparity Solutions and the William and Nancy Richardson Professor in Health Policy. In addition to being a friend, Dr. Gaskin is a health services researcher, health economist, and an internationally recognized expert in health and healthcare disparities. His research focuses on policies and practices that promote equity and address the social and structural determinants of health. So during our time together today, we're going to unpack and address some of the themes that resonate and that come up regarding civic engagement and how we can think about civic engagement for health equity. We're going to hear from Marc and Darrell in a conversation, and we're going to have time at the end to respond to questions. So thank you again for being with us today. And thanks again to the IDARE committee in the Department of Health Policy and Management for designing today's session. So let me go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Darrell Gaskin.
Thank you, Keshia, for that very kind introduction. And why don't we just launch right into this conversation that I've been anxious to get involved with Mayor Morial. First, I must say that the opinions expressed in this forum are my own and are independent of my affiliation with Johns Hopkins University and the AME Zion Church, because I'm an ordained minister there. So for some introductory remarks, let me just first say, politics is a difficult and complex game. And some of us are playing it enough to be frustrated, but not enough to be satisfied. I get it. We didn't get the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. We didn't get the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. We didn't get the kind of gun control that we wanted or the debt relief that we wanted for our students. We didn't get the climate change legislation that we really wanted. And instead, we have a Supreme Court that has struck down affirmative action and the right for safe reproductive health care. In addition, we have an anti-woke or comatose governors and legislatures outlawing the efforts to enhance diversity, equity, and inclusion as if they were mass shootings or some cause of some extreme weather event. I get it. We're frustrated and angry with the people who we voted for and helped elect. Moreover, we are upset with the systems of government that continue to promulgate and sustain racist, unjust, and inequitable policies that plague our community. Our frustration is great, and some of us are contemplating sitting out of the next election. And I want you to know that this would be a mistake. We must stay politically engaged. Our problem is that we're participating in politics enough to be frustrated, but not enough to be satisfied. Daniel Dawes was here a couple of months ago, and in his book, The Political Determinants of Health, he tells us that there are 3 branches of government as well as 3 layers of government. And hence there are 9 political entities that determine public policy. And this is the context in which we're playing this game of politics, trying to get the policies of equity and health equity enacted. It's a difficult game, and history tells us if you just control one square, so if you control the presidency or the mayor's office, a single branch will not help you win. We've seen with the election of both President Obama, or you think about the late Mayor Harold Washington. They had the executive branch, but they had their efforts stymied by the legislative branches, one on the federal level and the other on the city level. And then even if you have the legislative and the executive branch, we've seen with the Fannie Lou Hamer, Rosa Parks, and Coretta Scott King Voting Rights Act reauthorization and amendment, which was passed in 2006. The House passed it 309 to 33. The Senate passed it 98 to 0. And President Bush signed it into law. And then what happened? The Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision, gutted the Voting Rights Act. So politics is a difficult game. And if we want to win, we have to be willing to try to take advantage and to gain control of every square on this game board. And as Daniel Dawes told us, there are 9 of them out there. And if you don't control them and have influence in them, you can't get your policies enacted. So I would say let's not be frustrated with our elected leaders and stay at home, but instead let's go out and get other squares on the political game board so that we can get the things that we want to achieve, our anti-racism, just and equitable agenda moving forward. And having said that, those opening remarks, we have just the person here to help us figure out how we can play this game of politics so that we can win. And that is person of Marc Morial, the president and CEO of the Urban League. And so Keshia already graciously told you his bio, and so I'm not going to do that, but we're going to have a conversation, and we're going to talk about 3 things, and then I'm going to open it up to you all. We're going to talk about engaging in the political process, how to get our allies to help us and work with us, and how to confront these bullies in our politics. So, having said that, so Mayor Morial, you've heard me say that we're participating enough to be frustrated, but not enough to be satisfied. Can you tell us how we can move our agendas forward so that we can participate enough to be satisfied?
So first of all, let me thank you, Dr. Gaskins, and the entire team at the Bloomberg School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins University. And let me thank you all because several years back in the middle of COVID, you all served as a research partner for our State of Black America report. We were one of the first people to call on public health authorities at the state level to begin releasing disaggregated data on the COVID pandemic. The data with respect to who was hospitalized in emergency rooms, because in the early days, there was a myth being perpetrated that COVID could not affect Black people. What we learned is that it was disproportionately impacting African Americans because of underlying health conditions that existed. So I want to thank you all. We released that report, and that report was about shaping the public response to COVID, the various bills that took place, the various strategies that were undertaken. So I wanted to say that. Number two, Dr. Gaskins, there's an old saying that you don't go to a knife fight, you don't go to a gunfight with a knife.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I'll say, you certainly don't go to a gunfight with your hands tied behind your back. And to suggest, for anyone to suggest that you should not vote to send a message is tantamount to going to a gunfight with your hands tied behind your back. I do not believe in unilateral disarmament whatsoever. I do not believe that messages are sent by withdrawing from the political system. Mm-hmm. The message you send is one of utter stupidity.
Yeah.
Because you get laughed at. And they'll laugh at you and say, right behind your back, mm-hmm. Boy, they sure did send us a message. They send us a message that it's okay if the policy agenda adverse to theirs wins, because they were sending a message. Mm-hmm. Now, thirdly, in terms of civic engagement, I want to create a historical marker. Mm-hmm. In 1912, 112 years ago, Teddy Roosevelt ran for president of the United States as a third-party candidate on what was called the Bull Moose ticket. He had fallen out with William Howard Taft, his hand-picked successor, mm-hmm. and decided to challenge for the presidency. What's notable about that, and here's my point, is he ran, and one of his platform objectives was to create a national health corps running on the progressive ticket. Now, Teddy did not win that race. He finished second. His presence in the race meant that Woodrow Wilson would become president. Woodrow Wilson was a segregationist, mm-hmm. A Southerner who found his way professionally to New Jersey, but was a president with racist tendencies, who used racially charged language, who evicted African-American publisher William Trotter from the White House. Mm. Here's the point, 1912. It wasn't until 1934 and 5 when Franklin Roosevelt was able to pass Medicare. It wasn't until 1935 that another one of Teddy Roosevelt's quote-unquote campaign provisions was to create an old age pension system.
Okay.
It was 1935 when Social Security was created.
Right.
The groundwork for those policy interventions took place more than 20 years early. Mm-hmm. And that's important to understand. But what is important? It took a crisis of the Great Depression and abject human suffering and 25% unemployment and people being unable to eat for Americans and politicians in Congress to have the courage to pass things such as Medicare and Social Security and other relief bills. When Barack Obama was elected, he proposed what became known as the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare.
Yes.
The original proposal included within it not only expanded Medicaid, but a public option,
right,
for those who, quote unquote, would not be able to access the private healthcare market. that provision was excised because it was deemed and termed "quote unquote" socialist,
Right.
you know, in its iterances. And after the alternative, which was an expanded Medicaid program, took place, Congress passed it.
Yes.
Then the Supreme Court declared its mandatory nature unconstitutional.
Right.
And to this day, those states that have the highest rates of health disparity and medically underserved, like Mississippi and Alabama and South Carolina, have failed to expand Medicaid. My home state elected 8 years ago a Democratic governor. His first act was to expand Medicaid. It meant that an additional 300,000 people,
Wow.
half Black and half white, got health care coverage for the first time. What is the point here about civic engagement?
Yes.
In a democratic system like we have, policy ideas sometimes find themselves in the vortex of the clash of politics and the clash of positions. And it means that you are going to ensure that your agenda is never going to be realized if you do not participate. Because these decisions are being made by elected officials,
Yes.
be they state legislatures and governors, congresspersons, and presidents. Everyone on this call, on this Zoom, knows that.
Yeah.
You would be surprised how many Americans do not understand. How many Americans think that a president can do by executive order the same thing that the Congress can do by statute, that the two are interchangeable.
Right.
Or just because the president raises his hand, at some point it'll be her hand, and says X should be the policy, that X will be the policy. And so when it comes to civic engagement, where we are falling down as a country is in educating people about the system of American lawmaking and American government. Civics was once a mandatory subject in high schools in America. No mas. American government was much a mandatory subject. No more. We're not schooling people. What is it that we think that if they learn coding or chemistry or biology, important, but that's enough. You do not fundamentally understand. We have lost ground. Let me repeat that. We have lost ground when it comes to the fundamental understanding of our civic system. Here in New York, it was a walk-around poll at Times Square. Question: name your favorite Supreme Court justice. They asked a whole lot of people. Winning response: Judge Judy. Television judge. Most people couldn't name one justice of the Supreme Court and was so confused that a television personality was the leading Supreme Court judge. Number two, name the branches of government. Answers from some: federal, state, and local. Answers from some: Republican, Democratic, and Independent. Answers from some, of course, federal, state, executive, legislative, and judiciary. Most people flunked the test. Horrifying, but real.
Yeah.
Those of us who are serious about public policy, be it public health policy, jobs policy, housing policy, economic security policy, foreign policy, have to recognize you are not a serious participant or practitioner if you're not civically engaged.
Right.
If you are simply intellectualizing, discussing and debating, ideating and creating, but you're not involved in a civic process, then what you are doing is shadow boxing.
Okay.
And this has to be understood by all of us in today's world. In today's world, Medicaid, Medicare, the Affordable Health Care Act is a federal program.
That's right.
Federal program. The money that went into, for the most part, the development of a COVID vaccine was public money. There was some private money. Public money, the distribution system to create mass vaccination options was primarily public money paid to private firms. Therefore, it was an act of Congress that authorized those expenditures. So I'm saying all of that because I want to paint a practical picture. What do I say? Those of you who are teaching young people have to stress this as a part of every single course and class. Every one. So that people are not confused that just the strength of an idea will execute it into existence.
Right. So
that it takes something else.
So we can't say if we build it, they'll come. We have to do more than that. I sort of pulled really two interesting points that I want to see if I can get you to delve into a little more. So one thing you point out is that this game is a long game. It's not a short game. You can't just win it with one election. And the other thing that you pointed out was that there are multiple layers, and a lot of policy takes place in the at the local level. A lot of things, so even after the Affordable Care Act was passed, governors had the opportunity to decide to expand Medicaid. Some didn't, some did not. So could you talk a little bit about how we get things, how do we get an uninformed, uneducated in terms of not civil people who don't have the civic education to know the wherewithal of how the government works? How do we get them engaged so that they do the things at the local level that we need them to do so that we can get the equity agenda?
It's such a good question. And I'm sometimes challenged by the problem, because there was once a time in the 80s and maybe slightly into the early 90s where high turnout and high participation in mayor's races. You talked about Harold Washington, my great role models. My own election, where there was 70% turnout. My father, who was mayor, had two turnouts. One had 85% turnout. The other had 78% turnout. Or mayors across the nation, these mayor's races used to generate significant participation and turnout. A lot of governor's elections. We've seen a dramatic fall off. Go look at the last Baltimore's mayor's race. Look at the last Chicago mayor's race where they had 32, 33, 34 votes. Go look. Something has occurred. Is it candidate quality? Is it people have lost confidence that local government can make a difference? Is it lack of an understanding as to the role that local government can play in people's lives or state government can play? I'm a little startled because I do believe that many people are voting for none of the above by not voting. It's a way of saying none of the above. I call it the popsicle mindset.
Uh-huh.
When I was a little boy, I loved orange popsicles. If I went to the corner grocery store and there were no orange popsicles, I didn't buy a popsicle.
Right.
I just bought no. I said, when do you have an orange popsicle? Oh, 3 days. I'll be back. And I didn't like anything else. I didn't like the blue one. I didn't like the red one. They had a green one. None of them. I just wanted my orange popsicle. A lot of people are taking that approach to politics. Look, I don't like any of these candidates. Therefore, I choose not to vote. Now, having said that, I believe that mail voting should be universal.
Uh-huh.
I believe that early voting should be universal. I believe that cities, states, and the federal government should spend money on nonpartisan education efforts, where to vote, how to vote, that we should move in the direction of making voting as easy as filing a tax return, as easy as ordering from Amazon, as easy as getting my dinner from DoorDash or Uber Eats or Grubhub. Why can't we make it easy? They have figured out how to make it safe, secure, and available. Why can't we move in that direction? Maybe it's not online, maybe it's mail, so that my mother, who's 92, does not have to walk down to the polling place or get someone to drive her and get someone to help her get inside, but that she can sit in her kitchen with the ballot, take her time, call up and ask, and take her time and be delivered about it. We should universally, the Freedom to Vote Act that you referenced,
right.
John Lewis Voting Rights Act, would in fact do that. That's the system in places like Maine, Colorado, Minnesota, states with less Black and brown people have the least or the most open and expansive voting systems. States with large numbers of African Americans and Latinos, Texas and Georgia,
right,
Alabama, for example, are states that have been ratcheting down and making it more difficult to vote. But I also would say that's systems. I also think we need candidates who are going to bring energy and passion and a true commitment to transformative change into the electoral system. I see many people who are very, very talented, passionate about change, don't want to run for public office, don't want to offer themselves. Oh, it's too messy. Oh, it's too this. Oh, it's too that. Well, I ran for public office. I could have chosen a career in investment banking. I'm a lawyer by trade. I could have done a whole lot. It was a passion of mine. I grew up in a civil rights and a political family. I was raised to believe that that's what you did. And so it drew me to the work that I've done. But many of my colleagues and professionals, I wouldn't fool with that. We support you, but we don't want to be involved in that. Like your talent would be needed. You would make an ideal candidate. So sometimes we struggle with attracting people, and it's not a knock on the people who run, but it is the idea that this still remains an important call, an important service. And you don't know the only person that can propose a bill in the Maryland legislature is a member of the Maryland legislature.
Right.
The only person who can sign a mayoral executive order is the mayor. You could come up with 1,000 ideas. If the mayor don't sign it, the legislature doesn't introduce it and enact on it. So we have some issues. To me, we need a civic engagement revolution in this country of people who understand we have a system in this country. We have a mixed market economy.
Yeah.
Dynamic public sector and a dynamic private sector and a dynamic not-for-profit NGO sector, right? That's the uniqueness of America. and all three should be strong and dynamic,
So,
right?
I was going to say, so politics is a tough business. I mean, so people don't want to get involved because they don't want death threats. They don't want their character assassinated. They don't want their family harassed. This is a tough business these days. How do you talk to encourage people to get involved, given that if you stand up and you take a stand for something, that you might find that there are enemies who will come after you and come after you hard?
When I see a Dr. Keshia Pollack Porter and a Dr. Darrell Gaskins and others of you who have masters and PhDs, one thing I know is you have had a lot of sleepless nights. You put in a tremendous amount of time. You withstood tremendous pressure to achieve what you've achieved.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is easy. It's a different kind of difficulty, but it's a difficulty. I would submit to you that what you do is extremely difficult and intimidating to a lot of people. For those of you that are, highly educated, PhDs, master's degrees, teaching, how many people couldn't stand in front of a group of people and talk to them? So I'm using that to say, yes, politics and elected office has pressure points and sacrifice points. But I would say to you that all high callings have pressure points and pain points and pressure and being attacked. You, as scholars, some of you are scholars, write, think, ideate, and you're challenged.
Yeah.
By other people in the academy, by the public at large. So we gotta, I'm saying, Dr. Gaskins, it's a level setting, right? And then there are those of you who may not be able to serve in government in an elected place, but say, I would be willing to serve as a volunteer. I'll serve on a task force. I'll serve on a commission. I'll serve in an appointed position. I appointed a lot of advisory councils and task forces, right? Because I thought I needed a way beyond the civil servants to get ideas and get energy around an issue. So I had a task force. A task force worked for a definite period of time with a specific subject, 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, a year, tackle a project, look at it, make some recommendations to us. Right. An advisory council operated more on an ongoing basis. And so we use the two, and we look for, smart people, connected people, community people. I like to balance people from different sectors, different races and genders. And my vision was I need to create a room that looked like the city, so that I would get the best sets of recommendations around this. So there are ways, and some of you probably participate in those ways now. And I think I encourage electeds, even at the state and local level, to make use of the tremendous firepower you have within universities and within colleges and within community-based organizations, people who are very, very knowledgeable, but they don't want to run for office. They may not want to take a job in government, but they'll help out. They'll help out. They'll be like a supplement to your staff. And so civic engagement, to me, involves getting the people involved around, and it's easier to do at the state and local level. If I wanted to appoint a task force, I didn't need to subject everybody to the FBI background check.
Okay.
Right? I didn't need to go through all this rigmarole, right? Like you see at the federal level. You ever get appointed to a federal advisory committee? They're going to look at they're going to Google you, and it'll take 8 months to get through a process for you to take a job where you're not paid a dime. That's that. But many state and local levels, even here, I've served on a couple of local advisory councils here in New York, and it's been send me your resume, they might do a little check, but it's not. I've served on 3 presidential commissions. The guy called me and said, well, we just got all the news articles where your name has been mentioned. And if I put them in front of me, it would be 10 feet high. I said, have fun, right? Have fun. I mean, he says, I think they expect me to look at it. He says, maybe you can tell me what might be in it that might cause some attention. I said, maybe I can give you a couple of thoughts and I'll give you a response, right? Because he said, I don't know if I want to read through all of this stuff. But that's the reality. So I encourage the governors, the mayors to utilize its civic engagement, getting the citizens involved, getting the intellectual firepower involved around a range of issues and say, here's a problem. You guys tell me what your thoughts are, your recommendations are. I use advisory councils on restructuring agencies. I used it to help develop new zoning ordinances. I helped it, just a range of issues and problems. And it was helpful because I got energy in a short period of time in a way that had I waited and allowed the bureaucracy to do it, I would still be waiting for the report.
Wow. Well, I can't hog all of the questions. So I'm going to ask those of you who have questions, if you would put them in the chat. What I'd like to just probe just a little bit. I observe that, in some cases, the federal government isn't problems, resistant at the federal government isn't the problem. I mean, it's not federal governments that are, sort of banning books in local libraries and at school boards, or it's not federal governments that sort of mainly responsible for ignoring police brutality that might be taking place in the city. It's usually the mayor, the police chief, and the state attorney's office. So how do we sort of get engaged at that level to try to again move our equity agenda forward?
So there are many, many ways. I think, the old fundamental is building a relationship with the electeds to be able to influence them on issues, right? To the extent that that is an avenue to, and it's easier done through collectives. For example, and I'll just throw this out, there may be a collective of, let's call it, public health educators in Maryland. Maybe there's an organization, maybe there's a coalition. That group can speak with a single voice vis-a-vis the governor, or vis-a-vis the mayor, or vis-a-vis the legislature, or vis-a-vis members of Congress, because those members will say, oops, I just got a letter or a request for a meeting by the Public Health Roundtable of Maryland. They will know these are my constituents. I need to have a conversation with them. And that's an illustration. Groups like organized business, chambers of commerce, organized labor, groups like in some communities you have interdenominational ministerial alliances, right? Who have tremendous impact and influence because politicians know they represent big congregations, constituencies. A lot of these electeds say, hey, I've been by Reverend so-and-so's church.
Right.
When they call me up and want to talk to me, whether it's about police reform or police misconduct or anything, they're going to be in my office in 15 minutes. I mean, I'm not going to stay. So organized approaches to impact sometimes can yield better results, and than a singular person, because sometimes if the singular person has that long-standing relationship, like I have a couple of folks,
Yeah.
New Orleans, they are professors and deans at colleges and universities, but I grew up with them.
Mhm.
So if they call me, I'm gonna call them back in 2 minutes because I know they're calling me to say, hey, I want
Right.
to pull your coat on this. I want to make a recommendation to you. I got some thoughts. I got something I want your support for. But then there's organized approaches, right? So, and I'm using this, you guys as an illustration. That's what the key is, and not hesitate to advance the conversation. A smart elected is going to want to be in conversation.
So,
right?
so I know that in this environment, diversity, equity, and inclusion are under attack. And the sort of the anti DEI movement and the sort of forces of inequity who want to promote what I call these SIE policies, policies of segregation, inequity, and exclusion. And they've been bullying institutions to abandon the work of DEI. How do you think we should handle this when we get outside interference, persons calling for people to be fired and trying to encourage institutions that are trying to do the right thing with regard to diversity, trying to do the right thing with regard to equity and inclusion, and then they meet this outward resistance, and then in some cases abandon?
I expect college presidents and institutions of academia to stand up to bullies, to demonstrate some courage, and to understand that all diversity, equity, and inclusion is equal opportunity. It's the operationalization of equal opportunity beyond just rhetoric. And to recognize that we're in the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Yeah.
Had I spoken to a group of scholars at Johns Hopkins in 1964, it would have been 100% white men. And to recognize how this long march, whether it's called equal opportunity, affirmative action, DE&I, I mean, it's been about including the formerly excluded, and recognizing that talent knows no color.
Yeah.
And not hiding behind artificial measuring sticks. Artificial measuring sticks, like for college admissions. Standardized tests are artificial and incomplete measuring sticks.
Right.
And it's a tool, but it's just a tool. And doing college admissions solely based on artificial measuring sticks. I've got a son finishing the University of Pennsylvania this year. I've got a daughter who's an applicant. She's in fact an applicant to Johns Hopkins and a number of other schools. She wants to be a physician. But my kids are, they're great, smart kids. But I watched how much better they did on the standardized test after I spent money on a coach in a class.
Right.
I mean, it was, interesting, right? To watch, how preparation yielded. So it told me these are not measures of innate ability.
Right.
They're measures of some innate ability plus preparation and training. All that to say, institutions have got to stand up, and the public is on your side. Let me offer for your attention in reading a Harris poll conducted by the Black Economic Alliance, which showed that almost 70% of the voters in America believe that institutions and corporations should do more, that institutions and corporations don't do enough, and that, diversity, equity, inclusion, however you define it, is good for America. The voices in opposition have power.
Yes.
And they're loud. but they are a reactionary bunch that would turn this hands back. And I'll also say this. The United States has 350 million people.
Mm-hmm.
And our population growth is slowing. Significant.
Right, that's right.
We have the largest economy in the world with 25 trillion. The countries we compete with economically primarily have 5 times as many people. China,
Right.
India, and the like. If we are going to compete economically, we can't sideline a third of the population, or 40% of the population, or 50% of the population, or marginalize them so that they can't perform to their fullest. This is an issue of economic security, national security, and American competitiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I went to University of Pennsylvania, Georgetown. I tell people all the time, University of Pennsylvania had an affirmative action program. I don't know how it worked. I was a smart kid. I was an honor student in high school. I got in.
Right.
But affirmative action never took a test.
That is true.
Never went to class. Never sat for the bar. Never made a presentation. It may have helped to open a door. That was about it. Right? That was about it. And so if you ask people, has the Civil Rights Act worked? Call it what you want it. Have open doors worked? If some people want to call it DE&I, try to demon, then I say, look at Michelle and Lindsay. Look at Catherine. Look at the people who in 1964 would not have had the opportunity, and how successful they are today. I dropped the mic. The case is done. These are the exhibits.
Right.
Right? And it doesn't suggest the exclusion of anyone. But an America of 1964, where the prerequisite for a position of responsibility was fundamentally to be a white man. That was the prerequisite. To be leading a university, a business, to be in a government position of responsibility. That was pretty much a prerequisite.
Right.
And so when you sometimes when you level the playing field, it feels to some people like you're taking something away from them that they're entitled to. When you level the playing field, and that's what, we're trying to level this playing field in America. Universities must stand up. If I had been, anyone asked me, I would have never had my college president go to a Three Stooges pie throwing contest called a congressional hearing. When university presidents are put in a disadvantageous situation. I have testified before Congress 100 times.
Yeah.
I'm an experienced trial lawyer. I can handle. I don't expect anybody to be able to handle that if you don't. That's like saying, let's go play tackle football with the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I can go out there because I watch it on TV. I know exactly what to do. And bam, you get knocked out. So what happened? This is not your lane. And those members of Congress set those 3 presidents up. They set them up. They held them there for 5 hours. They used them as a punching bag. And people need to understand. And it worked to the detriment of 2 of them.
Right.
Right? They lost their jobs. Word to the wise, you got to understand what that means. And I saw it, and when I watched them there, I cringed because I asked myself, I'm an alumnus of the University of Pennsylvania. Why are they there?
Right.
You don't have to go under those terms. You said, I am going to tell you, they'll come for 1 hour. I want the questions in writing in advance. And I need to understand that you all are not going to cut them off or try to make an example out of them. Otherwise, we're not going to participate in such And so I understand that when you stand up and show courage, but
Right.
university presidents, and I'll say this to them directly in a room, you have got to stand up for the values and the mission of your university. And you have to stand up. Look, donors have a right to an opinion,
Right.
not a right to control.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
Alumni have a right to an opinion, not the right to control.
Mm-hmm. You are
And
preaching to the
academic freedom is something that matters. It's not unlimited, right?
Yeah.
But you got to stand up to bullies, and that's a fundamental thing. And I hope that those of you on the faculty, if there's a faculty senate, will communicate that collectively to the board of trustees and the leadership of the university. We have an expectation that you're going to stand up. We have an expectation that you're going to protect us. We have an expectation that the values that we believe are true are going to be defended, and not because someone comes with loud voices and threats and just back off. Oh my goodness. Please don't do that in this moment. Please don't do that in this moment.
Mayor Morial, you remind me, I'm an old, well, somewhat old AME Zion preacher. One of my colleagues, his name was Reverend Dr. Lewis M. Anthony, the late Reverend Dr. Lewis M. Anthony. And I always enjoy just talking with him because all I would have to do is just mention the subject, and he was a fount of information and knowledge and wisdom. And so I know that we're coming up on time, but I want to just encourage those of you who've been listening to this conversation. Don't give up your seat at the table. Don't give up your seat at the table. One of my favorite Langston Hughes poems is I Too Sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when the company come, but I laugh, I eat well, and I grow strong. Tomorrow I'll be at the table, and when company come, no one will dare say to me, eat in the kitchen. Then, besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. There is plenty of room and plenty of food on the American table. More than enough for everyone, even though there's some diner, some person sitting at the table who says that there's not enough and they want to exclude people and they want to take people's seat at the table. But don't give up your seat at the table. Fight for your seat. Shirley Nathan Pulliam, who's a great Maryland politician who fought for health equity during her career, she would say, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Yes.
And so keep your seat at the table and stay politically engaged, have courage, and encourage your friends to do the same and confront the bullies. Now, I'm a good AME Zion preacher. When I have a guest pastor come into my pulpit, I always like to give them the last word. So, Mayor Morial, if you have some final thoughts you'd like to share with us, we're all ears.
I'll just say this. Let me just thank you all for what you do, and thank you for the conversation. I wish we had gotten to more questions, but I'd love to come back. I'd love to come to campus and interact with you all. I really encourage your work and your commitment in this moment. Courage is important. Conviction is important. Commitment is important. And in times of challenge and controversy, which we're living in, those values are super important. And we need those of you with the knowledge and the intellectual firepower to be in the debate. Please don't stay aside. Please don't be in the gallery. Be engaged. And to be engaged doesn't mean being partisan. This is about values. what we stand for, what we want to stand for, what we want to be as a nation. So I encourage it. Carpe diem.
Thank you. Thank you. Won't you, everyone in the Zoom room, join me in thanking the mayor and showing your appreciation. I appreciate all of you for coming. I saw that the chat was very active with questions, and in some cases, persons responded to other persons. It is the benefit of doing this kind of thing on Zoom, in that you can have conversation and then you can have other conversations and you don't interrupt the main conversation. So again, thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Keshia and Michelle and Edith for pulling this together, and Lindsay too. I appreciate all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Mayor. Appreciate you.
Chat.
Mark, with this Operation Midas